Welcome to Risky Business. Today we're talking about Castlevania Harmony of Dissonance, another cool music-themed name for a pretty cool game. Released for the Game Boy Advance in 2002, Harmony of Dissonance is the follow-up to the popular Circle of the Moon, which I talked about on this channel previously. This was called Castlevania Byakuya no Concerto in Japan, and it is the first Castlevania game that Koji Igarashi directed after Symphony of the Night. Thank goodness that KCEK was no longer involved in making Castlevania games. In fact, KCEK no longer existed by this time. A failed experiment by Konami that resulted in the absolute worst of the Castlevania franchise, but we're not here to talk about that. With Igarashi back at the helm, maybe I would finally get the real successor to Symphony of the Night that I had been waiting for 5 years. I was very disappointed in Circle of the Moon.
You were the chosen one! It was said that you would destroy the Sith, not join them!
And the artwork for this one looked promising. I mean, check this guy out. Look at his pale skin. That's a vampire for sure. But a vampire with a whip?
Oh, you see this guy? See this guy? Number one bullshit guy.
In hindsight, it seems pretty obvious here that Ayami Kojima, the main artist for Symphony of the Night, made this artwork. Fans like myself might have thought that they would get to play as Alucard again, or at least somebody like him. But instead, the hero of Harmony of Dissonance is once again a Belmont. And no, he isn't a Belmont that has become a vampire. That would be stupid. Instead, he is Just, the grandson of Simon Belmont and the grandfather of Richter. This story takes place right between the events of Simon's quest and Rondo of Blood. The story begins with Just's friend Maxim, injured and amnesiac, asking for his help, explaining that their friend Liddy has been kidnapped. Luckily, Maxim just happens to know where she's been taken, though he can't explain why. He brings Just to a castle, but this couldn't be Dracula's castle. 100 years have not yet passed since Simon Belmont destroyed him, and Just has only just set out on his own mission to find the remains of Dracula before someone else does. Just like Symphony of the Night, the castle exploration is broken up with dialogue segments that advance the storyline and bring you to one of 3 possible endings, depending upon whether you find and defeat the true end boss. Just plays very similarly to the Belmonts of the past, and can even brandish his whip just like Simon could in Super Castlevania 4, but without the cool swinging and swashbuckling moves. Just like Circle of the Moon, Just's powers revolve around a gimmick, but this one is much simpler. Throughout the castle, you'll find spellbooks, each with an elemental property. These can be combined using the sub-weapons for various effects, including familiar ones like Hydrostorm and Holy Cross. Using the sub-weapons with a spellbook consumes MP instead of hearts, and while Just can find HP up and heart up items all over the castle, his MP can only be increased by leveling up through defeating enemies. And of course, the enemies give you less XP the higher your experience level is. Just can also slide on the ground or scoot forward or backward using the L and R buttons respectively, which make not just for a convenient way to dodge attacks, but also a much faster way to get around the castle. Unsurprisingly, you'll find relics that will allow you to see damage numbers and enemy names, and even double jump or super jump to reach new areas. Just's only weapon is the Vampire Killer, but different tips can be attached to increase its power. Add an elemental or break down barriers that block the entrance into certain parts of the castle. In addition to this, various items are needed to open sealed doors. As the story progresses, Yuso will learn that there are actually 2 castles. But instead of the inversion theme from Symphony of the Night, these castles are simply layered one on top of the other. You'll be able to travel back and forth between the 2 castles at only certain warp rooms, and it does get more than a little confusing for a while. Bringing up the map screen is the only way I was able to tell which castle I was in most of the time. until I reached a point where any warp can be used to travel within one castle or between both, at which time it all becomes much easier to get around and hunt for all the minutiae that you may have missed. While you can run around the castle attacking everything in sight and try to grind for rare items, I never felt compelled to do that in this game. It didn't seem like there were any items that were so powerful or useful that it was worth killing the same enemy hundreds of times. You can also buy equipment from merchants, but each merchant in the game has a special requirement, like an odd level number or an even number of hearts, for example. There's also some light puzzle solving here, including box puzzles and pushing certain enemies into machines to open a passage. I found boss fights in this game to be incredibly easy, which was kind of a bummer. I defeated most bosses very quickly, and I didn't have to think that much about strategy or patterns. So while the boss designs are great, they're not particularly memorable. After completing the game, you can enter boss rush mode, which adds some depth to the encounters and limits your power, your stats, and level, but they're still mostly really easy. There also isn't much new in terms of bosses, because a lot of them were just borrowed from other Castlevania games, including the attack patterns. Another low point, apart from the bosses, and probably the most unforgivable, is that the soundtrack here just isn't very good. Iga would later say that they sacrificed the music for the graphics. Michiru Yamane is certainly no slouch, having composed some of the most memorable tracks in video game history, with Symphony and Bloodlines. Coupling that with the GBA's notoriously bad audio makes for an uninspiring soundtrack which is truly disappointing in a franchise that is known for its incredible music. A unique touch is the addition of Yust's room, an empty room in the castle where Yusta can place all the furniture he finds lying around the castle. It's a weird inclusion, and it doesn't seem to serve any actual purpose. At least in Symphony, if you sat on a chair or something, you could wait and there would be some kind of Easter egg, but you can't even interact with this furniture. Maybe it's just there to flex on the game's graphics, which are admittedly very good for a GBA title. The sprites are large, and what they lack in detail due to the limits of the GBA, they make up for with really cool visual effects in the backgrounds. There's some 3D backgrounds that have lots of motion, almost like a Mode 7 sort of a thing, and they add some real depth to the otherwise flat atmosphere. Surprisingly, a lot of the enemy sprites have a good level of detail. It almost looks like they were taken directly from Symphony of the Night, so that's not too bad. Now, if you're still with me, please do me a favor, throw me a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel, turn on those notifications so that you'll get a notification when the next video comes out, and leave a comment, let me know you're out there, and let me know what kind of videos you would like to see. Of course, no Igarashi game would be complete without a secret mode, and in Harmony of Dissonance you can play as Maxim. He looks a little out of place with the big sword on his back, and his animation is really stiff, almost like it was an afterthought. I think they were kind of running out of space on the cartridge and they did the best they could, but it almost looks kind of comical at times. Maxim does have an infinite jump, which costs MP, and he only has one sub-weapon, a shuriken that travels in an arc, so he can explore the entire castle right away. After playing this game for the second time in about 20 years, I found it to be one of my least favorite Castlevania games. The design of the castle, it's just not as good as its predecessors. And when you couple that with the lack of good music and the easy uninspired bosses, a lot of this game just feels kind of phoned in. I mean, don't get me wrong, even a mediocre Castlevania game is still pretty good, and I did enjoy playing it. If you would like to check it out, this game is available on the Castlevania Advance Collection, or you can get the GBA cart secondhand, but prices for authentic carts at the time of this video are around like $60 USD, which is a lot for an older game. There are some cheap repro carts out there for around 20 bucks though. I actually do still have this one lying around here somewhere. Thanks again for watching. Please like and subscribe for more content like this, and leave a comment, let me know you're out there. I want to thank you for watching until the end, and next time, please join me for a deep dive into the RPG Zack, the Art of Visual Stage for the Super Famicom. That game has a very interesting history, so you're not going to want to miss it. Until next time, game over.